Okay, imagine this. You've been working so hard, you've been super disciplined, and you finally pay off every single one of your credit cards, right down to a perfect, beautiful zero. You feel great, right? You feel responsible, like you're on top of the world. So you go to check your credit score, expecting a nice little pat on the back, and instead it's dropped. How is that even possible? Well, it's one of the most baffling, counterintuitive puzzles in personal finance, and today we're going to solve it.
And look, this isn't just some theory. This is a real post from a real person on Reddit who is just completely floored. They did exactly what they thought was the smart, responsible thing to do. They wiped out their debt, and boom, their score tanks by 41 points. And trust me, they are not alone. This question pops up all the time from people who are just trying to do the right thing with their money. So that's the big mystery we're going to unpack in this explainer. How can being totally debt-free, even for a little while, actually end up hurting the very score you're trying so hard to build? The answer, it turns out, is hiding in a few secret rules of the credit scoring game that, let's be honest, most of us were never taught. Okay, let's dive into this.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a 30% utilization rule. It's probably the most important number you're ignoring. Then we'll pull back the curtain on the one date on your credit card statement that changes everything. From there, we'll explore this weird paradox of zero debt, introduce you to a pretty slick optimization method called AZEO, and then finally, we'll lay out a strategic plan for how and when to actually use all this knowledge.
All right, first up, let's get into this thing called credit utilization. If you're only focused on paying your bills on time, you're missing a massive, massive piece of the credit score puzzle. So take a look at this FICO score breakdown. Everybody knows that payment history, that big purple slice, is king at 35%. But look at what's right behind it, highlighted there in blue, amounts owed. It makes up a whopping 30% of your entire score. And the main thing that drives this category is your credit utilization ratio. And that's just a fancy way of saying, how much of your available credit are you actually using right now?
Now here's where it gets really interesting. You've probably heard the advice forever, keep your utilization below 30%. And, looking at this chart, that's not terrible advice. Once you cross that 30% line, you can see a clear score reduction. But here's the secret. People with those super high 800-plus scores, they don't live there. They live way up top, in that ideal zone, making sure their reported utilization is in the single digits, like between 1 and 9%. That's how you get the absolute maximum positive impact. Okay, so you might be thinking, great, I'll just pay my bill in full every month and my utilization will be zero, problem solved. And that's exactly where we get to the core secret of this whole thing. It's not just about what you pay, but when you pay it, all based on a date that most people just completely ignore. Every single one of your credit card statements has two dates that really matter. Everyone, and I mean everyone, knows the payment due date. That's the one in big bold letters. You miss it, you get hit with late fees. But there's another earlier date, the statement closing date. You can think of this as snapshot day. It's the moment your bank freezes your account, calculates what you owe, and takes a financial picture. And it's that snapshot that gets sent off to the credit bureaus. Let's just walk through a typical cycle here. So day one, your new cycle begins. You use your card for a month, buying gas, groceries, whatever. Then on day 30, you hit the statement closing date. And right at that moment, click, the snapshot is taken. Whatever your balance is at that instant is what's reported. Then you go into a grace period for about 3 weeks before you finally get to day 51, the payment due date. That gap, that's everything. It means the balance that gets reported is often 3 weeks old by the time you actually pay your bill. So here's the crucial point. If you charge, say, $2,000 during the month, and that $2,000 balance is still sitting there on your closing date, then the credit bureaus see a $2,000 balance. It doesn't matter if you pay it off in full, on time, 3 weeks later. Your responsible payment doesn't go back in time and erase the high utilization that was already reported. This is the hidden calendar of your credit report.
So now we can finally understand what happened to that person on Reddit. They almost certainly paid all their cards down to zero before their closing dates. They thought they were reporting a perfect 0% utilization. But that leads us right into our next paradox, this bizarre specific penalty you can get for having no reported debt at all.
It actually has a name. Among people who really dig into FICO scores, it's known as the all-zero penalty. It's a real, documented feature of the scoring algorithm. Basically, your score gets dinged if every single one of your revolving accounts, we're talking credit cards here, not loans like a mortgage, reports a $0 balance in the same month.
And we're not talking about a trivial little dip here.
This penalty typically causes a score drop of anywhere from 15 to 25 points. I mean, that can be enough to knock you from one credit tier down to another, which could actually cost you real money through higher interest rates. It's so frustrating because it punishes you for what feels like perfect financial behavior. So why on earth does this penalty even exist? This quote really nails the why. At their core, credit scores are just risk assessment tools. Their whole job is to predict how you'll handle debt in the future based on how you're handling it right now. Well, if all of your accounts show a zero balance, you aren't actively managing any revolving debt. So from the algorithm's point of view, there's no current data to analyze. It can't see your behavior, so it labels you as a slightly higher risk than someone who is actively managing a small, responsible balance. Okay, so we've established that reporting high utilization is bad, but reporting zero utilization across every single card is also bad. So what's the solution? This brings us to a really powerful, actionable strategy. It's an advanced technique that credit pros use to squeeze every last possible point out of a score.
It's called AZEO, which just stands for all zero except one. And the strategy is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You basically manipulate your reported balances so that all of your credit cards report a zero balance to the bureaus, all except for one. You pick one designated card and you let that one report a small positive balance. This keeps your overall utilization incredibly low, but it also lets you dodge that all zero penalty. So how do you actually do this? It's a pretty simple four-step process. First, you have to become a little bit of a detective. You need to go online, pull up your statements, and find the exact statement closing date for every single one of your cards. Second, a few days before those closing dates roll around, you pay off every single card to zero, except for your chosen one. Third, on that one special card, you let a tiny balance report. We're talking like $10 or whatever gets you to about 1% utilization. And then finally, step 4, as soon as that card's new statement is generated, you pay off that small balance completely before its due date. You get the perfect score boost without paying a single penny in interest.
Now, if you really want to master this, here are a few pro tips. For your one card, always try to use a major bank card, from a big issuer. Don't use a retail store card. And you have to be aware of a very specific quirk with Chase cards. Chase has this unique habit where they'll send an extra report to the bureaus anytime you pay your balance to zero, even if it's in the middle of a cycle. This can totally mess up your AZEO plan. If you use a Chase card as your one and pay it off right after the statement closes, they might report that new zero balance, which could accidentally throw you right back into the all zero penalty. And please be careful of two really common pitfalls. The first is something called trailing interest. If you were carrying a balance last month, paying just the statement amount might not get you to a true zero because of the daily interest. This can leave a surprise little balance that messes you up. Second, if you're an authorized user on someone else's card, just know that those accounts are scored separately. So if all of your personal cards are at zero and the authorized user card is also at zero, you can still get hit with the penalty. For perfect optimization, one of your personal cards has to report a balance. Now, after hearing all this, I know what you might be thinking. You're probably thinking, do I really need to be micromanaging my credit cards like this every single month? And the answer, thankfully, is absolutely not. So let's talk about the practical side of this and when it really truly matters. This is probably the most important thing to understand today. AZEO is a score optimization tool. It's a finishing touch. It is not meant to be a stressful month-to-month habit. The only time you really need to worry about doing this is in the month or two right before you're about to apply for a major loan, like a mortgage, a car loan, or even a new credit card. A 20-point swing on your score in that moment could mean a much better interest rate, which can literally save you thousands of dollars. All right, so let's recap the big takeaways here. First, your credit report runs on a hidden calendar, and that statement closing date is the day that really matters. Second, paying every single one of your cards to zero can actually trigger the all zero penalty and temporarily drop your score. Third, the AZEO method, all zero except one, is that pro-level trick to squeeze out the maximum number of points right before a big application. And finally, and this is great news, just remember that utilization has no memory. The penalty disappears the very next month you let a small balance report, so there's no long-term damage at all. So at the end of the day, you now know something that most people don't. Your credit report isn't just a passive record of your past, it's a dynamic system with its own rules and its own calendar. And now that you know how it works, you have the power to strategically show the best possible version of yourself right when it counts the most. The only question left is, isn't it time you started using it?